to Mr. Schulkraut, who worked hard on today's program, to tell you a little bit about what you can expect.
Good afternoon, Shalhevet. In about 40 minutes, you will have the opportunity to participate in a mock 2016 election for President and Vice President. To be better informed about the issues, we are presenting a debate between surrogates for the two major presidential candidates. Assistant Vice President for Government Affairs at Yeshiva University and former New York State Assemblyman Phil Goldfeder will be representing former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And Mr. Avi Furtig, Special Assistant to the Hempstead Town Board, will be speaking on behalf of Mrs. Hispanic Donald Trump.
Also father too.
We thank them for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here with us today. Now's the time to applaud. The surrogates have agreed to the format. There will be no opening statements. There will be 2-minute answers to each candidate on each question of each topic, 1-minute rebuttal if needed, 1-minute closing statement. Surrogates will be referred to by their respective candidates' names, Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton. Time will be strictly imposed. No character insults will be allowed. In most cases, I will just ask what the candidate's policy or proposal or position on the topic is. Surrogates are expected to give respective candidates' position, not their own. I will only interrupt if the candidate strays significantly from the topic or engages in character insults. We toss the coin, and Mr. Trump will answer the first question first, then we will try to alternate. If you watched any of the televised debates between the real candidates, you know that the moderators ask the audiences to refrain from any responses to what the candidates say. We have the same request today. Please, no cheers, jeers, boos, etc. They will reduce the time we have for the debate and will be insulting to our guests. Let's begin. Mr. Trump, you announced your candidacy. When you announced your candidacy, you emphasized the need for immigration reform. What is your proposal to reform the nation's immigration policy?
Well, I think anybody who's been around for the last year and a half since I came down the escalator in Trump Tower, you know that my most important initiative is to build the most beautiful wall you can possibly see anywhere in the world, probably nicer than the Great Wall of China. It's going to be on our southern border. It's going to be a tall wall, and it's going to maintain our border. It's going to prevent any illegal aliens from coming across the border, from changing the nature of our country, which we like to keep as it is. It's a great country. It's going to be great again. And it's going to be a wall that's going to be the pride and joy of the United States. And I will be the one who has built it, and that is the key part of my immigration policy.
Mr. Goldfeder, 2 minutes.
So let me first thank Shalhevet and all the organizers of this debate. It's great when candidates can come and share their opinions and make sure that voters are informed about the policies and the issues of the day. I have spent my entire career in public service, starting with the Children's Defense Fund, fighting for the American people. And when it comes to what makes America great, because America's always been great, is our diversity, is our ability to come together. We are a nation of immigrants. We have people all across the country who came, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, came here to get the American dream. We still believe in that American dream. Every single day, our middle-class families are fighting for that American dream. And as the immigrant families that have helped build this country, that have provided to make this country so great. And so I have a campaign that's about coming together, about bringing our families together, about bringing our countries together. For too long, we have seen people fighting with one another. We've seen rhetoric about causing divisiveness and hatred. This campaign is not about that. This campaign is responsible immigration policy, about ensuring that our immigrants are provided for, and that we do the best we can, of course, to secure our borders. I believe that Mr. Trump is exactly right. We need to secure our borders, and that's why I voted and supported those ideas for years in my time in the Senate. But we've got to do more to ensure that there's a pathway to citizenship so people can feel welcome, so our nation can stay diverse and continue to be great like we always have been.
Thank you. Mr. Trump, any rebuttal?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the Secretary talks about what a diverse country we are, and the truth is we are a diverse country, and the truth is that, yes, we are a nation of immigrants. And the most ambitious immigrants from around the world came here to make a new life for themselves in the United States. But they came in with permission. They came in legally. They recognized that this is a country of law, that we have laws that matter, that need to be enforced, that need to be respected. And by coming in, that was the greatest act of respect, to come in and hold the laws of this nation as important as their own personal ideals. They came in legally. What my wall is going to do is going to prevent illegal immigration. We need people who are going to come in, because my wall is not just going to be a wall, it's going to have a door in it. It's going to have the most beautiful door you can imagine, and it's going to allow people to come in here legally, which is exactly what this nation needs. We are a nation of immigrants, but we have to be here legally, we have to respect our laws.
And you know, it's disappointing because we're talking about deportation squads going house to house, door to door, scaring our families. You talk about walls, divisiveness. That's not what we're about in this country. What makes us so great is our ability to come together. We shouldn't be scaring our families. These are immigrants, many of whom are paying taxes, are contributing to our societies, like our grandfathers did, our great-grandfathers did before them. And so this is, there's an absolute no question that we've got to secure our borders, but we've got to do a good job of ensuring that everybody feels welcome and that there's a pathway to keep everybody feeling safe in this country.
Thank you. Just a word. The candidates do not know the questions in advance. They know the general topics, but they have not seen or heard the questions in advance. Moving on. High on the list of concerns by Americans is the economy. Economic growth has hovered between 1% and 2% during the last 2 years. What is your proposal to expand the American economy? Secretary Clinton, you're first.
This campaign is built on focusing on the middle class. We have a thriving middle class, and our goal is to make sure that we can keep it there. You know, people come to this country or are in this country to have the American dream, and so we have to ensure that there's an economy that can provide for that. And we do that by putting money where it's needed, not to the wealthiest Americans, but providing middle-class Americans with the tax breaks they need to be successful. We put money back in the hands of those people who are going to go to their local stores and spend those dollars. Instead of subsidizing millionaires and billionaires and top-down economics, what we're going to do is take money and put it into your hands, the American people. And then you can go and spend it. And that's how our economy is going to grow, and our economy is going to succeed. We have seen failed policies too many years of rich, wealthy people just finding ways to enrich themselves and continue to grow their own pocket. We're going to put money back in the hands of the middle class, right back in your pockets.
Well, the Secretary talks about taking money and mentions failed policies that we can't pursue, and I find that a curious thing to mention or even admit, simply because the failed policies of the last 8 years of the Obama administration are the very policies that the Secretary embraces wholeheartedly and intends to continue with as if she were somehow lucky enough. I don't know how that would happen other than the fact that the system is rigged. If he somehow could become the president, those would just be the same policies again and again, the policies that have kept this nation mired in the most anemic recovery since the Second World War. We're at 2%. This country generally has an annual gross domestic product of at least 3.5%. We're stuck between 1.4 and 2%. That's embarrassing. There's no reason why we should be there other than the fact that we have failed leaders who have high ideals which are generally completely wrong-headed. What we need to do is we need to reform our tax system. Instead of having 5 different brackets, we need 3 brackets. We need to bring the corporate tax down from 30% to 35% to 15%. We have trade deals which are destroying this country. They have been put in place by the stupidest possible people who had no business going to a negotiating table. If I would be negotiating these trade deals, I can assure you that if there was one part of that deal that I did not like, it wouldn't matter if I was halfway signing and I would walk away from that table. That's what you need to do. We cannot walk over to our adversaries and tell them we'll just do whatever you want. Like the Iran deal, for instance. It's mind-blowing that there would be an Iran deal. Why would we go and pursue an Iran deal? And what we need to also do is we have the most onerous regulations you could imagine. They're killing small businesses, they're killing jobs, they're forcing businesses out of this country, and we need to take substantial measures, which I plan to do as the president in order to stop it, in order to make our nation great again.
You know, Mr. Trump talks about big ideals. Actions speak louder than words. And so we talk about creating jobs in this country. We talk about providing for our middle class, yet Mr. Trump ships jobs overseas. His ties are made in China. His steel for his buildings come in from all over the world. And yet his workforce is immigrants, is using literally immigrants from other countries to use workforce instead of providing jobs for American citizens. This is the person who has done this for his entire career. Mr. Trump has proven time and time again that the American worker, the American people are not his priority. His bottom line is his priority. His ability to make more money is his priority. And he shows it by shipping jobs. He could have been buying steel from Middle America. Instead, he went to China. He could have been making his products here in this country. He could have been helping our New York economy and the upstate economy that has been struggling. And yet he chose to ship those jobs overseas. And so I'd rather take a look at someone who has worked for the American people. I've spent my career working for the American people, coming up with real ideas, real solutions, while this is just more talk from someone who's trying to line his own pockets.
You know, it's amazing that you would bring up upstate. I would almost think that you would have been embarrassed to do that. When you were the senator of New York State, you swore up and down that you were going to create 2 million jobs in the upstate New York region, which is an absolute, it's a vacuum of jobs and economic opportunity. There's nothing going on up there. You walked in there, you said, vote for me, and I'm going to get 2 million jobs up here. And I believe when you stepped down from the Senate, there may be, I believe, maybe 2,000 jobs. Probably less. Maybe there were people that you had hired yourself to work on your next campaign. I couldn't tell you what that was for. I don't know who made any money from it. But when you're talking about opportunity, the only way you can get opportunity in this nation right now is for us to go back to the ideals that made this country great, which were free enterprise, low regulation, getting the government's nose out of your business. We have to support our small businesses, and we have to make sure that the tax code is fair and it's not favoring any elites such as Warren Buffett, who seems to be so in support of your agenda.
We talk about trying to bring jobs and get things done, and yet you have a record of shipping jobs overseas. Again, actions speak louder than words. I've worked very, very hard fighting for New York State when I was a senator, as Secretary of State, traveling to hundreds of countries to try and come up with ideas, ways to real solutions that are going to create jobs in this country, not overseas.
Okay, let's move on. Next question. It goes first to Mr. Trump. Recently, the Obama administration announced that Obamacare premiums will increase an average of 25%. Although most low and middle income families will receive government subsidies, which will reduce these increases. What is your health care proposal?
Well, my health care proposal, first of all, is to say Obamacare is a disaster. It is the worst conceivable health care solution, if you can call it that this country has ever proposed. There are so many ways that we could have fixed our health care system, which is why my very first day of office, I'm going to put a request out to Congress that we have to repeal Obamacare, we have to replace Obamacare. Fortunately, I'm the best person to come into office to do that, because I have some extremely effective plans in order to make the next replacement for Obamacare as effective as possible. And some of those include, and this is, first of all, we have to get rid of the individual mandate. How do you force people to buy something? You can't do that. And not only if they don't buy it, then you fine them. These are middle-class people. And the premiums, why are they going up so high? They're going up so high because we don't have competition in our insurance policies that you can buy. What we need to do is we need to break down all the barriers, and we have to allow nationwide, all of the different insurance companies that are selling healthcare plans, we need to get them to be allowed to sell across state lines, which is going to create competition, and it's going to create a better and more affordable product for Americans. Another thing that we must do is we need to allow Americans, regular Americans, middle-class Americans, to deduct the cost of their healthcare from their from their taxes. And this is going to do essentially what the country has been allowing businesses to do since World War II. They're going to be able to take a necessary, an essential expense that they can't get around, they need to have health care, and deduct it from their salary, from their taxes. And this is going to make health care more affordable and more palatable to every person in the United States. And that's what we need to do. We need the best health care in the world. We have the best health care in the world, and we need to preserve it. And by doing that, the only way to preserve it is by making it more affordable, by allowing our doctors to work free of all the regulations the Obamacare had. I know a guy, I just spoke to a doctor, he said he has more accountants working for him these days than nurses. The Obamacare regulations are so unbelievably onerous that he needs to get away from it, or he's planning to retire. And we cannot allow that to happen, and I will not as president.
You know, once again, actions speak louder than words. As First Lady, when my husband was president, I worked very hard to reform our healthcare system. And I came so close to accomplishing real change in our healthcare system. And I give President Obama a tremendous amount of credit. So many people told him not to try, not to do it, it's too hard. And in 2009, he began the process, and he built bipartisan support to create a healthcare system that works for every family. Sadly, too many Americans were uninsured, and those people were unprotected and didn't get the care they needed. And so yes, there are problems. There are cost problems, there are issues, but as they say, we don't just get rid of the entire system for a few problems. Think about this. People graduate college, you get a job, and your company doesn't offer you health insurance, and you just have no other options. And under Obamacare, we're able now, until you're 26, to be covered by your parents' insurance. Number two, pre-existing conditions. Insurance companies can no longer deny you when you have for pre-existing conditions. And number three, and most important, is that we cannot insurance companies can no longer discriminate against women by charging higher rates just because we're women. At the end of the day, there's no question. Premiums are too high. Premiums are too high. We've got to fix it. We've got to find a way to change it. But we've worked too hard and come too far to make this program affordable for every single American, to ensure that people have the peace of mind they need and that they deserve.
You know, I have to tell you, I kind of pity Secretary Clinton, because every time she opens her mouth, it's like walking through a minefield. You mentioned your early '90s efforts to become the architect of a new form of health care, when the entire Congress, it was unanimously voted against your disaster of a plan. I mean, it would have destroyed our entire healthcare system had you been successful. Unfortunately, the wisdom of our government, which is a phrase that I virtually never use, it came into force, and they came out against you, and thank goodness they did. Obamacare is very, very flawed. I mean, to say that it's just a few problems is, I mean, that's like the greatest understatement since Noah said it looked like rain. You know, we really need to not throw out the 26-year-old, you know, allowing children to stay on their parents' policies until they're 26. And by the way, I would hold on to that. I think that that's an important thing, as well as the pre-existing conditions. But you don't have to destroy the entire healthcare system in the greatest country in the world, which has the greatest healthcare system in the world, in order to create a product called Obamacare, which is creating the worst possible trends in healthcare, which is higher costs, fewer doctors, and less options for regular middle-class Americans.
You know, while I was fighting as First Lady for health care for all Americans, you were fending off lawsuits from employees who weren't getting their fair share. And so my service speaks for itself. And so we talk about the amount of lawsuits from your employees who continue to come forward and talk about problems they've had working in your companies. I have a proven record of fighting for everyday Americans, while you have continued to deny them the rights that they deserve, especially the women.
Moving on. Currently, the United States is the world's leading producer of natural gas and is on track to becoming energy independent. Increasingly, Americans are turning to renewable energy sources, wind, solar, and geothermal. At the same time, the coal industry is dying, displacing thousands of workers. Starting with Secretary Clinton, what is your energy policy?
Climate change is real. We have got to focus on the future and trying to bring about clean energy policies that work not just for Americans, but around the world. I think it's our responsibility to be leaders, and historically we have been, and we need to continue to be leaders, specifically when it comes to energy. We have a lot of people who work in the coal mines. We have a lot of coal miners in states all across the country, and we need to make sure that they're protected as well. And so we can't drastically change policy without thinking of the people who are going to be affected. And so yes, while we have a responsibility to the future of to our children, our grandchildren, to change our energy policy, to look at renewables, to look at wind, to look at solar, to look at natural gas. At the same time, we've got to bring job training to those people who are going to lose their jobs. And so we've got to bring more programs to get people prepared, to teach people about the new technologies that are out there, and become self-reliant. So we no longer have to worry and rely on powers in the Middle East for our oil. And so we've got to work hard to change the way we think, to change our outlook, but also to retrain American workers so we can keep those American jobs here.
You know, we have some of the greatest workers in the entire world, and many of those greatest workers are involved in the energy industry. Now, the secretary over here is talking about creating jobs and making sure that our workers are kept safe and secure and that they have jobs that can be trained. I don't really think that they would need to be retrained had the secretary not come to Pennsylvania and inform the entire coal industry that her goal, her aim as president is to put them all out of work, which is essentially what she did. And that's absurd. You know, coal is an essential part of our broad spectrum of energy options in this country. We have the greatest resources. We have every conceivable energy resource you can find anywhere in the world. People talk, the secretary talks that we have to become energy independent. We are energy independent. If it wasn't for the EPA's ridiculous regulations which hamper advancement and innovation at every step, we would be able to harness as much of our natural gas, as much of our oil. We would be able to have take advantage of gas and coal and every other resource that God has created and put underneath our feet right here.
You know, I urge you all to go to HillaryClinton.com so you can see the truth, right? The truth is very, very simple. While Mr. Trump talks about American workers, he doesn't actually hire them in his own companies. He talks about American jobs, but he doesn't actually create any. He talks about how successful and how wealthy and how big of an empire he has built, but it's been on the backs of the American people and of our workforce. And so it's easy to talk about these things, but I have spent a career working. And so yes, we need to look towards the future. I believe our coal miners need to get that job training so that they can get new jobs, so they are aware of the new technologies, and that we can keep our job force strong, and that we can keep our economy strong, and still move towards the future.
Well, it's a future of untold misery and joblessness, and you have people like Secretary Clinton taking over the presidency, God forbid, and throwing coal miners out of work, forcing the EPA to create as many restrictions as they possibly can, like the U.S. Waters Act, which was just passed, which essentially prevents private landowners from draining a puddle in their backyard. If you know, they could be brought under federal charges for that. These are the types of regulations that I will fight for to get rid of. Any regulation that I come across which is not good for America is a regulation that we do not need. And by the way, forgive me for saying this, and I know we're not supposed to say anything along these lines, but honesty and Secretary Clinton are not two words that I generally associate with each other. So I hired somebody to look through your website, and they informed me that there was virtually nothing truthful on it. So my website is great, but I can't talk about yours.
I have no response.
And moving on. The United States, along with some of its NATO allies, is fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan. We are returning military personnel to Iraq to deal with the growth of ISIS, and tens of thousands of American troops are currently stationed in Germany, South Korea, Qatar, and Japan. We help the governments of Colombia and Mexico fight drug cartels. Should the United States continue to play the role of the world's policeman? Mr. Trump?
Depends on how well those policemen are being paid. You know, right now, as the world's policeman, which the United States has been doing since probably since we became a country, and if not that, then World War II. We've been supporting and defending and paying for all kinds of military interventions, protecting some of the worst parts of the world, making sure that this world is as safe as it possibly can be. And frankly, we're overpaying. There's no reason why our allies in NATO need to be expecting us to cover a bill of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars every single year in order to make sure that they're protected. There's no reason why Japan, which is an incredibly successful country, South Korea, which, they make more televisions, well, they don't make cell phones anymore, they explode, but North Korea, South Korea, excuse me, all these countries in the world, Germany, these are some of the greatest economies that we have in the world, and yet we have to pay to defend them. We're getting the short end of the stick, and we need to stop doing that. Now, what's going on with the Taliban, it's unfortunate because I'm saying here that now we need to kind of expect other countries to take up the slack, but they're doing a terrible job in Iraq and in Iran and in Afghanistan and in Syria getting rid of ISIS. We need to crush ISIS, and we need to be extremely, extremely clear. We can't just play games with semantics such as the secretary does. She doesn't want to call Islamic terrorists or Islamic radicals, I don't know what she calls them. She calls them, not nice people, unnice people. We have to have a very clear policy on what we're going to do with ISIS and with terrorism, and that's the only way we're going to become great again, by leading the world and making sure that we are free and safe from terrorism and any kind of Islamic terror that is coming to our shores. If we do not build the wall that I mentioned before, we need to build a wall, and we have to have vetting and making sure that ISIS is not going to show up at our doorsteps, which, by the way, believe me, that it's exactly what they want to do. I heard from somebody who told me this.
You'll excuse me if I choose not to believe you, because usually what is coming out of your mouth is not the truth, because it's not based on facts.
$20 bills usually come out of it.
As the late, great Senator Patrick Moynihan once said, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but not to our own facts. The fact is, as Secretary of State, I traveled to more countries than any other Secretary of State in the history of the country, and I have met with government leaders. And I'm going to work with them to stamp out ISIS, to keep our country safe. We have been making tremendous, tremendous progress, but that's because of our allies, because of our relationships, because of our ability to bring people together. There's no other country in the world that can do it. Now, my opponent, Mr. Trump, talks about ISIS and making everybody pay their fair share, and yet he's in bed with Putin, and sort of asking Russia to intervene. Asking a foreign country to intervene in our country, in our election system, asking Mr. Putin to hack emails in our country, essentially espionage, and it's being encouraged by Donald. Donald continues to encourage foreign leaders to engage in espionage. That's not the leaders we need. We need responsible leaders who are going to do the best they can to build alliances, build relationships, to keep our troops and our families safe.
Secretary Clinton, if I recall, you're criticizing my reliance, if that's what you would call it, on Vladimir Putin, who's the president of Russia. If I recall a few years ago when our good friends, the Israelis, our best friends in the Middle East, the Israelis, they discovered that the Syrian government was gassing its own citizens. They were killing them out with poisonous gases and all kinds of chemical weapons. And the United States had drawn, the president said, there's a red line that you will not cross this. And sure enough, poison gas, chemical weapons, and the president, and I believe perhaps you, maybe it was Secretary Kerry at the time, but it was your State Department still. They called up the Russians and said, you know what, bail us out because we're too afraid. We're not strong enough because we've depleted our military, and it's not politically favorable for us to go into Syria, which is what we needed to do at the time. And instead, we kind of sponged that off on the Russians, and of course, they did absolutely nothing. And now, as we all know, the Russians are in Syria, and they're making us look like clowns. And clowns are not very popular these days.
Quite frankly, you don't have to look too far to see clowns. The fact remains that your good friend, Vladimir Putin, continues to undermine our democracy and our way of life. and quite frankly, is the first time in the history that a foreign entity has interfered with government, with the U.S. elections. And so I ask you to stand up and get up and call for him to stop, call for it to be stopped. This is embarrassing how, in front of world leaders, you continue to encourage espionage in our own country, and quite frankly, the American people are sick of it.
Moving on. Just reminding the candidates, no character insults, please. For decades, the United States has tried to bring about a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with very little to show for its efforts.
I apologize. Could you just repeat that again?
For decades, the United States has tried to bring about a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with very little to show for its efforts. We were able to achieve Egyptian and Jordanian recognition of Israel, but the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians continues. What can the United States do to bring about peace in this area of the Middle East? Mr. Secretary Clinton, your question first.
Much like my campaign, I have focused on trying to bring people together. Now, there's no question that this is an issue that has eluded presidents and presidents for many, many years. But for those of you who had the opportunity to listen to my Donald's comments, his bona fides on Israel are his marching in the Israeli Day Parade in New York. That's his.
Great parade.
It's a fantastic parade, I agree. Great parade. But I think it takes a bit more to understand complicated foreign policy, especially as it relates to the Israelis and the Palestinians. We need to know a bit more than just how to march down Fifth Avenue. We need to have real understanding of how to bring people together. And so there is no question that this is something that is going to be a priority for me. There's no question that I'm going to work with my great friend Bibi Netanyahu to bring about real peace, to bring about real change, because we've got to do things a bit differently. Right? We've tried so many different ways and we've been successful. My husband had success in the 90s, and we're going to try and make sure that we're continuing to move forward to be successful. But I can tell you this, that I have a history working at the State Department of bringing people together, people who originally no one thought could be done, and I've been able to bring them together, and I'm going to continue to do that. Now, I can't guarantee that we're going to make peace. I can't guarantee there's going to be peace. But I'm going to work real hard and use every ounce of experience to try and make real change.
Well, without a doubt, Israel is our greatest friend. It's the strongest and only democracy in the Middle East, and it's we share values that go back to time immemorial. And those values are what we are not recognizing anymore as a nation. And when I say we, I'm not talking about the American people, which overwhelmingly supports the great people of the State of Israel. It is our present government and our State Department which refuses to recognize the contributions that the State of Israel has given, not just to our nation, but to the entire world, and certainly the region in which they exist, or they're trying to exist on a daily basis, and being, their neighbors are trying to wipe them out. We need to stop trying to control Israel's destiny. If Bibi Netanyahu wants to build settlements, he wants to build homes in what are called settlements. They're actually not settlements. They're actually enormous cities. It would be like calling North Woodmere a settlement, because it's not part of regular Woodmere, if you can consider it like that. They are entitled. They have the right. They have the right to defend themselves. It is not our role. And it's not the president's role, it's not Secretary Clinton's role, it's not John Kerry's role to tell the Israelis how to run their country, how to run their government, to hang this specter of perhaps even sanctions. What we've done in Iran is an absolute atrocity. We had no right to go in there and make a deal and possibly bring about a nuclear weapon. Well, within 10 years, the Iranians are already breaking this deal. We need to be in sync with the Israelis. When Benjamin Netanyahu came to speak to Congress, he spoke the truth. Yet the president didn't want to be insulted, and he had the half of Congress walk out and embarrass our ally and our friend. When Bibi Netanyahu came to the White House, he was told to come in through a back door. And then he was sitting in a room by himself while the president went out to have dinner. This is the president that Secretary Clinton is looking to emulate. That is the role model on how to treat our great ally, Israel. I will not do that. We will have a great relationship with Israel. Israel will be entitled to have its own destiny. And in terms of its ability to make peace with the Palestinians, I believe, and I'm going to be, as a president, an advocate for Israel, making peace with Palestinians on their own terms, not turning the Palestinians into these poor victims that we need to come and support.
I have a record of delivering. I have a long record of fighting for the American public and fighting for our allies when the time came. In 8 years, I spent as a U.S. Senator, I led the support for funding to develop technologies like Iron Dome. So while other people were profiting over foreign countries and in foreign countries, I was helping our foreign allies support themselves and protect their citizens from terror. And so that's what I have done, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I think that we have set forth policies that are going to work, and ideally building relationships to get people together. But there's no question, Israel is our ally, they're our friends, we've got to do everything we can to protect them, and that's exactly what I've done in my career, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Secretary Clinton talks about her record, her record, her record. It's a broken record. To hear this over and over and over again about the accomplishments which in your reality exist, but in everybody else's reality do not exist. I mean, take a look at my career as a
Believe
builder.
him. Believe him.
You must, well, yes, thank you. See, he knows. He knows. Anyway, I am a builder. I've been building my whole life. Have you ever heard of a Trump building falling down? No, because I'm great at my job. I do my job well. And the people that I hire are the greatest people you can find anywhere.
Isn't that sad? The greatest people, yet he's getting them from Mexico. The steel is coming from China. And so we talk about these great big buildings, but how are we talking about supporting the American people and the middle class?
I think we covered how the Obama administration has destroyed the economy, which is why they've allowed China, incidentally, to manipulate their currency, which is why it is almost unaffordable to do anything in this country anymore. They manipulate their currency, which makes it impossible to compete with them.
And if there's anybody who knows about manipulating the rules, it would be you, because you have found a way not to pay taxes in 15 years. And so while we all struggle to survive, we all struggle to make it in this country, you find loopholes to get out of your responsibilities.
Those are not loopholes, those are laws which I am brilliant enough to recognize are of benefit to people such as myself and Warren Buffett and George Soros. And what I would love to do as president, that's one of the first things I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of many of these loopholes which are not fair to ordinary
So
Americans.
we should just believe that you've spent a career looking for loopholes in all of your industries, and you're going to become president, and all of a sudden you're not going to find, you're no longer going to appreciate those loopholes. You keep talking about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett recently released 47 years worth of tax returns and did not take advantage yet once, and yet you keep saying it. You keep saying it over and over again. I don't think it makes it true.
Of course Warren Buffett didn't take advantage. He just went according to the tax code as it's written and had the opportunity to take deductions which have been written for exceptionally wealthy people. And although I too am exceptionally wealthy, it still is not fair and it does not help the average American, which is what I am all about.
So while I want to support our military, you have found ways to take money out of their pockets. So while our servicemen need more bulletproof vests and better armored vehicles, you have found a way to deny them those safety rights.
Well, safety rights are important, and health care is also important. Our VA hospitals are falling apart, and the Obama administration, and by extension Secretary Clinton, if she should become the president, God forbid, will maintain that terrible standard of service, as opposed to if I was the president, I would turn those hospitals around. They would have the best doctors, they would have the best administration, and you know what? If one of our honored veterans were to go into one of these hospitals and demand, or not demand, they would be in desperate need of service, and they would have to wait to get a Band-Aid for 6 weeks, or to have a throat culture, or whatever, I would tell that veteran, you go across the street to that doctor's office, which will still be in business because I will have eliminated Obamacare, and you get that health care that you need, and we will pay for it.
The question was about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. According to the United Nations, the civil war in Syria between rebels and the government of the brutal Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad has created over 1 million refugees. Poison gas has been used by Assad against his own people, and Russia has deployed military resources to help Assad against the rebels. What should the United States do to solve the growing refugee crisis and limit the influence of Russia in the Middle East? Mr. Trump?
Well, the first thing we could do is make sure that the countries that they're coming from designate safe zones. And of course, I don't think that Bashar Assad is going to create safe zones to try and protect the citizens that he's been trying to butcher for the last 5 to 6 years. But we have a responsibility to ensure that our allies in the Middle East are going to create safe zones in which these refugees will be safe, and they don't have to come all the way to the United States. Now, talking about the United States and these refugees, it absolutely baffles me that Secretary Clinton is interested in expanding the number of refugees coming to this country from Syria and from other Muslim nations from 100,000, which is already too much, to over close to 700,000 over the next a year. We will have people coming to our country. We don't know where they're from. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they think. We don't know who they like. We don't know who they hate, who they want to blow up, or who they want to kill. And we need to have extreme vetting procedures in place in order to prevent ourselves from winding up being the next Austria, being the next France, being the next England is on their way to be that way, with terrorism and absolute anarchy walking around with the people that are coming into their nation. We need to be very, very vigilant if we're going to be accepting any of these Syrian refugees. And we need to help by stomping out ISIS. We need to get rid of ISIS. We have to make these areas safe, not just for the Syrian refugees, but for the entire world, and certainly for ourselves and our great nation.
So there's absolutely no question. Our number one priority is to keep Americans safe, to ensure that our families have a way of life that they can enjoy without the fear of walking down the streets of Manhattan and, God forbid, being a victim of a terror attack. There's no question about it. I served as U.S. Senator when the World Trade Center was attacked, and I was on the front lines of fighting to ensure that Americans were kept safe in the future. And so I agree with that. However, the problem is that there are refugees and people who are in need, of desperate need of help. And we have a responsibility, not just America, but countries all across the world have a responsibility to do their best they can. And so yes, I think we need to take in our fair share, but we've got to make sure that other countries are doing their fair share as well. We need to make sure that everybody is pitching in to help in this problem. And then ultimately, getting together to stop this from happening in the future. And so we're going to do that by holding every country accountable to do their fair share. But we're also going to make sure that we're doing background checks, we're doing investigations, and that we know that the people who are coming here are not going to be a threat to the communities that we live in.
Well, I'm glad to hear the Secretary agreeing with me. It's my idea to keep this nation safe. I wish the President would. I wish the President had. Do I get time on that? I wish the President had been doing that for the last 8 years, which unfortunately he has not, and Secretary Clinton has been his partner in crime. As a matter of fact, in terms of keeping our nation safe, one of the things that the Secretary, I wish the Secretary would have done, was not create ISIS to begin with. But unfortunately it's done, and you need a great president such as myself to clean up that mess, which I will do immediately, and I will make sure that all the Syrian refugees that want to come here will not need to, because they will have a safe home in their own countries, and it'll be great.
Recently, American intelligence agencies have stated that Russians, probably supported or encouraged by the Russian government, have engaged in hacking private and government computer files and email accounts. What is your proposal to deal with cybersecurity? Secretary Clinton.
You first have to admit that there's a problem in order to solve that problem. And so that there's no question we have a problem. Our major leading intelligence agencies here in this country have determined that it was Russia that has been hacking our emails, have been influencing our elections, and have been doing the most to interfere with our way of life. That is absolutely appalling. It should never be done by any country on anyone. But let me tell you, we have got to find a way to strike back. We have got to find a way to be strong, to ensure that our democracy is safe against all the new threats. As we change, as we evolve as a country and we grow in technology, we've got to continue to monitor the new threats that continue coming out. And so while Donald continues to have fun with his good buddy, Vladimir Putin, I'm trying to stop him and stop what his government is doing here in this country. It is absolutely wrong. I think that we've got to put in place strong mechanisms to stop it and ensure that the American people's information and way of life is secure in the future?
Well, cybercrime is the fastest growing, cyber theft is the fastest growing crime in the United States right now. And as our nation and all of our nations become more and more interconnected through technology, the fact that we have allowed these types of risks to grow to the lengths that they have grown. I mean, just a few months ago, Target lost 20 million credit card numbers. Somebody hacked into their systems. eBay lost about 150 million user IDs. The federal government was hacked. Now suddenly, people, who knows where, it could be some fat guy sitting in his basement somewhere in the world, is looking at the employee records of our federal employees. One of the things that I'm going to do, and there are a number of great things that I'm going to do when I become president, is I'm going to appoint, from the very, very first day, a cybersecurity task force, which is going to start to view all of the vulnerabilities in our nation's technology systems. What we need to do is take this very seriously. This is not just an issue of putting a wall on our border. We need to put a wall around our computers, around our computer systems. We are at terrible risk. Our transportation system, our military, our energy system, our financial system, all of these are very vulnerable right now to being hacked by very, very bad actors. And I'm not even talking about WikiLeaks, which is, of course, a terrible thing to happen. But I'm talking about the physical safety and well-being and economic future of this nation. And unfortunately, it has not been taken seriously up until now. I am somebody who gets things done. I'm somebody who's able to hire the right people to get things done right. It gets done under budget, ahead of schedule, and that is exactly what I'm going to do to protect our cyber technology in this United States.
According to Donald, hiring the right people clearly are not here in this country because he has a record of hiring from every other country. You know, those bad actors, as he just said it, those bad actors are proven to be his good friends, the Russians. And so we need to accept the fact that there's an actual problem here.
Putin is not my best friend.
Again, you go to HillaryClinton.com, you can take a look at Donald's tweets from years ago where he talked all about his good friendship and his great relationships. And so we have to face the facts. I have a history of working with our foreign leaders to address problems in this country, and that's what I'm going to do.
That concludes the question and answer portion of the mock debate. Each surrogate will now have 1 minute for a closing statement. Because the first question went to Mr. Trump, Secretary Clinton will give the first closing statement.
So let me just thank you again for having me, for hosting this debate. This is a very important election. This is an important election for every American in every state because your country is at stake. We have an opportunity now to make great changes, to make great strides, to make sure that this country remains great, because it's already great. And you know what makes it great? Is that we stand together. We stand together, united for one another. You take a look at disasters all across our country. You know how we get through those? It's because we work together. And we don't care about where you come from. We don't care about what you do. We care that you're willing to stand up for each other and to work together. And that's what I've done for the last 30 years. I've built those relationships in every state across this country. I have a proven record of getting things done. And as your next president, your first female president, I am going to continue in that record of accomplishment of getting things done because we're going to move forward together. I ask you for your vote and your support on November 8th.
Mr. Trump?
My campaign is entirely focused on making this nation great again. We're going to make America great again. And the reason why we are in a position where we have to look at our great country and say maybe it's not as great as it used to be is not because it's not as great as it used to be. It's because of the direction that it is going. And it's the direction, it is being taken in that direction by the Obama administration as well as a future possible administration by Secretary Clinton, who is very, very enamored with all of the president's policies, which are killing our economy, regulations which are preventing small businesses from prospering, healthcare, which is robbing denying our middle class, our entire nation, of the quality health care that, not that they deserve, but that they already have. And what we need to do to make sure that we're going to be great again is to look to the future and recognize what is going wrong, what could go right, and I assure you that as your president, we're going to be so proud of this country because we're going to be safer, we're going to be greater, we're going to be richer, and we're going to win. I'm going to win, you're going to win, and for that reason I say thank you very much for allowing us to debate.
That concludes our 2016 presidential mock debate. Let's thank our guests again for helping us to better understand the issues facing our nation at this time.
Could I just say one thing, please? No, this is very important, because Assemblyman Phil Goldfeder, and I'm not an assemblyman, but I work with elected officials all the time, so I guess you can say in some degree we're in politics. And this is something that I tell my kids all the time, because it's election season now. There are all these horrible things that are being said about one to the other. And I won't say that elected officials or campaigns or candidates are always friendly or admire each other, but a lot of it sometimes is theater. A lot of it is theater. And unfortunately, it sends the wrong impression sometimes. Now, I don't doubt for a moment that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump can't stand each other. But the truth of the matter is that the country, in terms of the political system, some of it is broken, some of it is not broken. And I happen to know Assemblyman Goldfeder for a number of years. He's an exceptional public servant. I'm very, I'm a big fan. And no matter what I said while we were talking, you guys should all know that we're friends, and we really work together and respect each other.
And that's really, can I tell you, just to finish that thought, and Navi is exactly right, is that we actually get things done when we find ways to work together. What we saw the lack of action in Washington and why people are so turned off is because you don't see anything getting done. And so you've got to find real ways to work together, and that's what we try to do here locally and what we should expect our federal leaders to do as well. Thank you.
Each grade will now be called up. If you want to vote, take a ballot. There's a table outside with ballot boxes marked for each grade. Check the box for the candidates that you want.
Yes.
There are pens outside.
Okay. Late, Mr. Shokrat, I don't think they all heard the instructions, so I'm gonna repeat them. We're gonna send you out each grade individually.